Welcome into the Inside Scoop. We are live, official visit edition. I'm here live in Nashville, Tennessee. You guys let me know in the chat, where are you watching live from? Because we got some huge visits to talk about today. Top recruits, visiting schools. They'll be leaving campus right about now. We got top recruits leaving these campuses right about now after spending an entire weekend. Official visit season is here, and we got the best insiders in the country lined up backstage, ready to break it all down. Speaking of breaking it down, how do you guys like these live shows? We've been trying them on Sunday. I think this is our third live show in a row. I'll be honest, I kind of like this live show. I like them because we can all get together on a Sunday. We all love talking recruiting, but where else on YouTube can you gather around and talk about your favorite team recruiting efforts live? Nowhere else. So we are going to get started. But before we do, guys, do me a favor. Look at this. We're almost to 100K. Let's get there before the season starts. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. Also, since we're live, please give us an upvote, thumbs up, whatever they're called. Let's get this thing out there into the algorithm. But until then, let's get started. What do you say? Let's bring in the top 10. That's good. That's good. USC on top. LSU, Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame at 5. The Aggies at 6. Clemson Tigers. They had their big recruiting weekend 2 weeks ago. They sit at number 7. Oregon, Miami, and Alabama. This is your top 10. In recruiting, don't get in the comment section and start yapping at me about this top 10's wrong. It is the recruiting top 10. Of course it is. It's a recruiting channel. All right, let's start this thing off. We have some big visits to take care of, to talk about. Let's start in Austin, Texas. Let's go to Justin Wells of Inside Texas, and we are going to get into it. Just an absolute monster of a weekend. Where do we even begin? Who did Texas make a move with this weekend, Justin?
Well, I think they made a move with a couple guys. As a matter of fact, we've already talked to a handful coming out of visits. Let's get started with the big names. Felix Ojo. I felt like they've already hit a home run with this kid, but it was time to bring in the closer to get the last 3 saves to kind of wrap this one up. I think they did a tremendous job there. But I got to tell you, Hezzy Kent, the big athlete, 6'6", 285. Out of Brunswick, Georgia. He's another one that really enjoyed the trip. Texas has him as the number 1 tight end on their big board. I think that kind of separates them from the rest of the pack. Vodney Cleveland. Like, look, Texas needed to really hit home with Vodney on this. He's coming off that OV from Florida. I think that official visit kind of moved them ahead. This one right now, just catching up with a couple sources, a couple close to Vodney. I think that the Horns may have taken that lead. We're going to get a little bit more later, and you can check it out here and at InsideTexas.com. But, yeah, Vodney Cleveland, I think they moved the needle with this guy. Dre Quinn, I think it's going to come down to Texas and Clemson for that kid. Dre loved his unofficial. He absolutely just finished his official and loved it. Talked to our Joe Cook. And so right now, a lot of good. This was a good weekend. It wasn't too many guys, but it was a strong number, a strong contingent. And like that photo you just posted earlier, Texas official visits are generally a family affair. And when you get all those prospects and all those current players together in one moment, they kind of build off of each other. I love where Texas sits with Samari Matthews. I love where Texas sits with Jalen Lott. He got to hang out with 2 former teammates, Dalen McCutcheon and Parker Livingstone from his days at Lucas Lovejoy. And so at the end of the day, I think they moved the needle with a handful of defensive guys they really needed to, especially the out-of-staters. And I think they cemented themselves with guys like Felix Ojo, with Zayden Crimpin, with those that they wanted to make sure that they can close and get in this class soon.
All right. Now, I had a source call me on Friday, somebody very close to linebacker Xavier Griffin, and he said, don't discount the Alabama hype. It's real. Yeah. But he said, Josh, this visit to Texas is also real, and he thought that the Horns would be a major player for Griffin heading out of this visit. What are some of the things that you're hearing on the 5-star from Georgia, from Alabama, wherever he's from? What are you hearing on Xavier Griffin?
He's from Gainesville, Georgia. The first time I saw Gainesville, I thought, well, maybe Florida kid. No, he's a Georgia kid. Former USC commit. Look, Xavier Griffin was, I think, a little hesitant when he took his unofficial back in April. Him and his mother were there. We were able to catch up with them. They were tremendous. I mean, they were awesome. He really had a great time. And so we knew Texas was going to be in it. Alan Clark, the former edge coach at Ohio State, the current edge coach at Texas, has really really just hit well in his short time in Austin already. And it's building these relationships out with some of the guys you just showed. Like I said, with Dre Quinn, I think they did a tremendous job this week as well. Xavier Griffin's an edge prospect for Texas. He might be the number 2 rated linebacker, but they view him as an edge at the next level. They know Alabama's the team to battle. And they know that's going to be the team that they're going to have to overcome. And also, don't sleep on Ohio State. I think Ohio State made a big impression on him as well. And so he's going to get home and he's going to have a big decision to make. But, I'm not going to sleep. I think Leon Clark did a great job here, getting them back, getting them settled in. We're going to have a little bit more from him at InsideTexas.com here in just a bit. But, with Griffin, they really this week, the first weekend was more shoot your shot. This weekend was more, cement that foundation that you had already built with a lot of these guys. And I think with Griffin, it was a little bit of both. Give them that best sales pitch, give them that shot, and then see if they can gather that up. At the end of the day, I think Bama's going to be the team they have to battle. But I think Texas did really well this weekend, and it remains to be seen. I believe he's got a commitment date, if I remember correctly, in July. A lot of these guys have some commitment dates coming up. But that's one that we're going to be watching closely because Leon Clark and the Texas defense has really got his attention. And truthfully, it's Colin Simmons. When he came in and watched the scrimmage and watched Colin coming off the edge, I think he envisioned himself doing that. And that's as much as the reason the Horns are in it as anything.
All right. Couple more questions. You mentioned Hezzy Kent at the beginning. Monster 6'6" tight end out of the state of Georgia, heavily considering Miami. But after Texas missed on Mark Bowman, does Hezzy Kent move up the board? Is he more of a priority after this weekend?
Yeah, he's on the top. He told us he's the top tight end on the board. That's what Jeff Banks, the tight end coach, told him. And I think that's actually what's separating Kent from the rest of the schools, or Texas from the rest of the schools, because I think some of the other ones envision him as an offensive tackle. And I got to be honest with you, when I see I know an offensive tackle when I see one, and that kid is ginormous. He can make an impact either way. But Texas really likes his skill set. And they have a scheme on offense where they use a jumbo tight end offensive tackle / kind of guy. Malik Ogbo did it a couple years ago. Andre Kuric did it in his first few years when Sark had arrived. In that role, Kent would thrive. I mean, he would be a legit blocker, a legit tackle-like guy in the edge in the backfield, and at the same time be a weapon on offense. Because if you watch any of that guy's tape, this dude is doing some wildcat stuff. Kent is a phenomenal athlete. I think for him to really get to where he wants to be at tight end, he's going to have to get a little leaner. He's already at 285, and that is massive for a high school kid. But at the end of the day, Texas tight end pitch, that sales pitch, I think is huge because I think most schools, again, they see him as an offensive tackle. Texas and Jeff Banks think he can catch the football on Saturdays, and I think that's going to give Texas the advantage. I think his decision, he's got one more official visit to Florida State, he told us, and then I think the decision is July 10th, if I heard that correctly.
All right, so close to 20 visitors on campus. A lot of them were committed already, but there's plenty of uncommitted guys on campus. Anybody that you're watching coming out of the weekend on commit watch?
Felix Ojo, Samari Matthews. Man, I want to say they did really well with Braden Rouse. Like, to me, I don't care what anybody says. He has the best high school linebacker tape in the class of 2026. He is a violent individual on Friday nights, and I'm here for it. I think they did really well there. You know, they've got Kosi Akpala, the other big target, coming in next weekend. I think those would be the two ideal takes in this cycle. But Vodney Cleveland, I look, you know, when I went to see him in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago, he told me his decision date's in mid-June. Well, buddy, we're in mid-June today. And so I think he has a pretty good idea. Now, I know he still has an official visit to Miami. It remains to be seen if that's actually going to happen. I think it will. But those are the guys. I think Samari Matthews. I think Zayden Crimpin. I think Felix Ojo. There's a number of them. They had one guy committed on campus this weekend, Yaheem Riley, a safety out of Austin Anderson. But these other guys, I think in the next few weeks, you're going to see more and more guys come off the board. Like I said, there's a lot of July decisions. There's a lot of late June decisions. Instead of waiting till August, right before the beginning of your senior year, they're kind of doing it a little bit earlier. And I think Texas they're not pushing, you know, kind of how Sark works. They don't really push till a few hours before National Signing Day, but they do let them know, hey, you're a priority. This is where we see you. You got a spot, jump in.
Yeah. It's going to happen soon. All right, Justin Wells with Inside Texas. You guys are keeping the updates rolling all day long. Go check it out. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
All right, Texas is buzzing. Speaking of buzzing, we're going to head up north. We are going to go to Ann Arbor, and we are talking some Michigan recruiting with E.J. Holland of the Wolverine. Michigan fans, hit subscribe. We are talking Wolverines recruiting today. And we got to start with number one running back, Savion Hyder. His recruitment is red hot. Now, it's not over. He's at Michigan this weekend, still has another visit to go. But E.J. Holland, what are the early returns on the Savion Hyder visit?
I think they're going well, man. He's wrapping up his visit right now. His agent actually got on campus a day earlier than Savion, Adam McCann, who does a fantastic job with the business side of his recruitment. And the thing about McCann is he has a great relationship with Michigan general manager Sean McGee. And as we've talked about on this show, Josh, Michigan took a kind of wait and see approach until the settlement was approved. That obviously went through, and now Michigan is open for business. Business is booming, as Mr. McCann had to say on Twitter. So I think that Michigan is going to take care of the business side. They really value Savion Hyder as the most important overall recruit on the board. But on top of just, the NIL front, I think the relationship with Tony Alford, Michigan's running backs coach, is outstanding. It's a long-standing. Alford has been recruiting Hyder since he was a freshman, so dating back to his time at Ohio State. So that relationship is real. I think, just the fit at Michigan, the Wolverines' history of feeding their running backs, of keeping their backs fresh, having a great rotation. I think, you saw Justice Haynes talk about, what it means to go into Michigan in his exclusive interview with Pete Nakos and play in that offense and play for Tony Alford and how he transferred in. So I think that, Justice Haynes, Jordan Marshall, those guys had a chance to be around Savion Hyder this weekend and really make him feel like part of the running back room. So I think Michigan gave it its best shot this weekend. Obviously, you have a huge visit coming up next weekend with Tennessee, and Tennessee's done a really great job here as of late. They're very aggressive on the business front as well. But I think Hyder's not going to make any rash decisions off, visit highs. He's a guy who's very calculated. He's been very calculated. He hardly does any media interviews, doesn't like to tip his hand or anything. So I think that, he's going to take a couple weeks to think about it, have more discussions before he makes a final decision sometime later this summer.
I like the fact that his agent came in beforehand, because you and I both know Savion Hyder. He keeps things close to the vest, doesn't really like talking about his recruitment too much, especially the NIL portion of it. So you were saying earlier in the spring, Michigan wasn't talking numbers. Now they're flying in agents before a visit to specifically talk numbers so that the visit doesn't get bogged down by that. Do you like this strategy that Michigan has moved to during official visit season?
Yeah, I love that strategy. I think that Michigan had a bit of a frustrating start to the recruiting process just because they weren't talking numbers. Everybody else was. People were getting upset. The recruiting class wasn't looking as great as it should have been, especially coming off of last year's strong finish. So I think that, Sean McGee has always been a smart guy. He has NFL experience. He worked with the Chicago Bears. He knows how to balance a budget. He knows how to deal with a salary cap. He, from talking to different agents that deal in the recruiting space specifically, they all love Sean McGee. They love his ideas. They love his plans. So a lot of these guys that didn't get exact numbers in the spring, like a Savion Hyder, their agents still had really good conversations with McGee about what things were going to look like at Michigan. And now with the settlement passed, those things are coming into fruition. And I think McGee was ahead of the curve in terms of being prepared for the settlement and how those numbers were going to be distributed for recruits on the trail.
Yeah, that's what you're saying all spring. They were waiting for this to happen. It happened. And now Michigan is heavily involved. All right, some other big names on campus: John Turntine, Travis Johnson, DQ Forkpa, linebacker out of Georgia. Who else do you feel Michigan made a move on this weekend?
I definitely feel like they made a move on Travis Johnson. I'm really looking forward to catching up with him and his mother. He was still on campus as of like an hour ago. So I think with Travis, he's that big play wide receiver that Michigan needs. He's 6'3", 180, so he's a bigger body, but he also runs routes like a small guy. I think the new offense with Chip Lindsey, Michigan's new offensive coordinator, he's bringing more of a balanced attack, and that's certainly appealing to Travis. I think also just the fact that you get an opportunity to play with Bryce Underwood, a former 5-star quarterback, #1 overall recruit in the country. That's a big selling point for Johnson. And, I think Georgia dropped out of this race. Penn State didn't hit that home run like they wanted to last weekend. So the door was wide open for Michigan heading into this weekend. I think, they have the momentum for Johnson. Like I said, don't want to speak too soon just because I haven't talked to him and his family yet. But I really like Michigan in that recruitment. I think they made a big move for 4-star defensive back Andre Clark. He's long been a guy that Michigan's prioritized, been after. He's a big time prospect also out of Virginia. He's really high on Kentucky as well. I think the Wildcats made a nice move last weekend, but at the same time, I think Michigan has always been that school at the front of his mind. And I think they continue to trend in a positive direction this weekend. 3-star defensive lineman Ben Boulware's not super highly ranked, but he is a prospect that Michigan really likes. They just landed a nice hidden gem in Alistair Vallejo earlier this week. They'd love to get Ben Boulware in there with him. So he's one that I think Michigan could easily bring into the class as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot of positive momentum. They even had a mystery visitor that will be unveiled pretty soon. I think they have a good chance at flipping him. So overall, a really, really positive weekend for Sharon Moore and the Wolverines.
All right, EJ Holland, I know you'll be busy all day running Michigan updates from this big visit weekend. You guys go check out thewolverine.com for more. EJ, appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
See ya. Wow, Michigan recruiting is heating up, and so is Oregon. Let's go to Eugene, where we're going to meet up with Justin Hopkins, covering a busy weekend of his own, but things got popping right here on the On3 Recruits channel with Messiah Hampton. On Friday, the #1 player in the state of New York committed to the Ducks, just what Oregon needed. Justin, is this the momentum to get things going for the summer?
Well, Duck fans certainly hope so, and I know Dan Lanning hopes so. It's, there is a version that people call the summer of Dan, because that's typically when Dan Lanning's kind of struck on the recruiting trail. Obviously, we're getting really close to that, or we're starting that. So, yeah, Messiah Hampton feels like a big win. For what has been a very long dry spell for Duck fans. There was a very brief Richard Wesley commitment to break things up, but of course that was interesting. So what I like about Hampton, obviously he's a great player. He's been a steady riser in our rankings. Our own Charles Power was on the Scoop Duck message boards talking about what they like about Hampton and what his spring has looked like and why he's risen in the rankings. All things were positive there. It feels like that's a huge win for new wide receiver coach Ross Douglas. Call him new because he showed up around March to Oregon after Junior Adams left to go coach with the Dallas Cowboys. So he was able to come in and kind of make a statement early about his recruiting ability. One big thing I like about Hampton, just besides that commitment and the fact that he's a good player, offensive playmaker, right? And this weekend, Oregon was hosting one of its top, if not its very top, quarterback targets for an official visit. So you kind of take that momentum a little bit and hope that possibly that helps you with some of the guys that are also visiting this weekend.
I agree. All right, let's talk about that 5-star quarterback. His name's Ryder Lyons. We got some good insight. His sister posted a pretty insightful TikTok of the visit. Here it is. Ryder Lyons, 5-star quarterback. We've talked about him a lot on this channel. He's been involved with USC, Michigan, but right now, Justin, it seems like all signs are pointing to Oregon. I mean, look at this visit. It seemed to go great. Family loved it. Sister loved it. Parents loved it. Is Ryder Lyons going to be a Duck soon?
Well, that would certainly be great news for me, and I'd love to cover that. This was a big weekend. Oregon knew that they had to hit this one out of the park. Obviously, you can see from the videos there, things are going incredibly well. And just like EJ was talking about moments ago with Michigan, Oregon's been very conservative when it comes to NIL and its dealings, and that's been a big reason for the slow spring, slow 2025. So I think now with those settlements in place and coaches and ADs getting some clarity, you're going to see Oregon really look to make that push. And Ryder Lyons is the guy. There was Jared Curtis and there was Ryder Lyons, and those were the two, from the onset that Oregon really prioritized and highly coveted. And again, I was just talking about Messiah Hampton moments ago. I'm sure Ryder Lyons would love to throw to a high 4-star receiver like Messiah Hampton. And that's the battle. If you're looking at Oregon, I think they're trying to sell a fair NIL package and a lot of weapons around you on the offensive line, at receiver, at running back, everywhere, versus BYU. BYU is a very strong program, but I think you look at the two rosters and you would feel a little bit better about Oregon. But BYU has gotten super competitive with NIL and has made a splash so far in this recruiting cycle. And they are a very real threat for Oregon with Ryder Lyons. So I know that's what this weekend was about, was trying to show him, hey, here's what we've got and here's what you'd be walking into. And I think they're hoping he doesn't visit BYU in the end. I guess we'll have to see about that.
All right. Now, last weekend it was 5-star. Every weekend there's 5 stars on campus. Richard Wesley was the edge last weekend. This weekend it is edge Anthony Tank Jones. Originally I thought he was gonna end up staying in the state of Alabama, but now it looks like Texas A&M has a foot in the door. How about Oregon?
Yeah, one of those guys that Oregon's just been real quiet with, and they're really good at that, right? Dan Lanning loves to pull those special surprise rabbits out of a hat. I do wonder if distance will be a hurdle here. That seems like something that could enter in this recruitment, but he hasn't talked a lot about that. I think Oregon's really pushing hard there, but I do think you mentioned Richard Wesley a moment ago. Obviously, if you look at a guy like Anthony Jones and you look at a guy like Richard Wesley, you're going to be using some NIL to get those guys signed no matter who you are. So I think in the case for Oregon, it would probably be fairly tough to land both of these guys. But one thing Oregon has done really well under Dan Lanning and Marshall Malco is they have contingency plans in place. It's not just, hey, we're all in on Richard Wesley and either we get him or we miss big. They've got other guys that they recruit very heavily and look for, fair deals and somebody that wants to show up. So I think that's the case with Anthony Jones. I feel better right now if you ask the question, and you might ask the question, will Oregon get Anthony Jones or Richard Wesley, which is more likely? I would say lean to Richard Wesley at the moment. I think Anthony Jones is going to be a really tough pull, out of that Southeast. But again, there's no harm in taking a swing here if you're Oregon.
Yeah. Absolutely not. I mean, you're right. This is how Oregon kind of creeps up into these recruitments. All of a sudden he's on campus and you're like, oh, wait, Oregon's in this. All right. Speaking of being in this, cornerback Devon Benjamin was on campus. We know he's a priority. How did this visit go?
I want to say perfect. I know they're all really good visits, right? Everybody does a good job doing these things. This is a guy that Oregon does feel fairly good about. There's been a lot of chatter about Washington and others kind of creeping in the mix here. But I'm not sure there's many recruits they've prioritized more than Davin Benjamin dating back 2 years ago. They've really just poured in a lot of effort here. And Davin Benjamin is a guy that can command a big NIL package, and he's going to get a fair package. But I don't think his recruitment boils down to that. I think he's a big relationships guy, and Oregon feels great about the relationships they've formed with him. Cornerbacks coach Rashad Wadood has led the charge there for those 2 years. Dan Lanning's been involved. Dan Lanning doesn't recruit a lot of guys himself, but Davin Benjamin's been one of them. So I think if you're Oregon, you're feeling really good about how things came out of this visit. And again, just like EJ was talking about with Michigan, Oregon is now ready to be a little bit more proactive and a little bit more aggressive with a better understanding of what NIL is going to look like in the future. So I think you'll see Oregon make a push here. And Davin Benjamin is a guy I feel like Oregon probably leads for and has a great chance at landing.
All right. Well, we'll be locked into scoopduck.com all afternoon waiting for these updates to roll out from official visit weekend. Justin Hopkins, appreciate you stopping by today on the live edition of the Inside Scoop.
Yes, sir.
All right. We go from morning in Eugene to afternoon in Coral Gables. Let's talk to Stephen Wagner of Kane Sport, where, Stephen, in Eugene, they're just waking up, but down in Coral Gables, they're already leaving campus, and it sounds like Miami is picking up some momentum. Let's talk about elite running back Jay Lamar. He was on campus this weekend. What are you hearing?
Miami, I think, is in great shape for Jay Lamar after this last weekend. We came into the visit weekend kind of feeling like the Hurricanes were a little bit of a dark horse with probably Georgia and Clemson, maybe kind of, some of the more likely landing destinations. I'm coming out of this visit weekend feeling really, really good about the job that Miami has done with Lamar. The Hurricanes have made an absolutely massive push for him. They really threw everything they could at him this weekend. He has been one of the top priorities on their board this spring. He's the number 2 running back on their board, only behind Derek Cooper. He is an absolute must-get priority in Miami. I think the Hurricanes are in excellent position coming off of this visit. I'm really excited to see, kind of what happens here over the next couple of weeks because he is planning on making a decision June 25th, and I think that Miami is very, very definitely going to be one of those finalists. It would not shock me if he ended up a Hurricane.
Yeah, and we know they are looking to load up on backs this cycle, so that would be a huge one. Speaking of big names on campus, we have more. It was really intriguing to see 6'6" Cali tight end Israel Briggs on campus, and it sounds like Miami made a move with him as well.
I definitely think so. So going into the visit, LSU had a very slight edge for Briggs, but the Hurricanes have been right there this entire time. Briggs has been one of the top tight ends on Miami's board this spring. He's the number 1 flex tight end on their board. They're hoping to go along with an inline guy or maybe a jumbo guy, kind of like Hezzy Kent. But the Hurricanes, I entered an RPM for them shortly after he decommitted from Arizona State because Miami did lead. LSU was able to take the lead last weekend. I'm feeling confident again about the Hurricanes coming out of this weekend. He's been kind of unclear about, what his timeline could look like. He said that he's kind of, just kind of waiting for the right moment to go ahead and pull the trigger. But man, I think it's really hard not to feel optimistic about the Hurricanes. If you're a Miami fan, I think Miami is absolutely right there. I still feel good about that RPM that I entered for him. I really think that there's a very good chance he ends up a Hurricane.
Speaking of ending up a Hurricane, wide receiver Calvin Russell, the local standout, was finally on campus in Miami this weekend after making visits all across the country. Can they keep Calvin Russell home? And who do you see right now is the biggest competition?
Yeah, so that's kind of been the $1 million question is, can Miami keep Calvin Russell home? Because throughout his recruitment this spring, it seems like at different points, we've heard all of these different teams trending for Calvin Russell except Miami. The Hurricanes have absolutely been right there this entire time. They've been a very consistent presence. They have excellent relationships with him. Kevin Beard, Miami's receivers coach, went to college with Calvin Russell's mother. His mother also went to college with Dennis Smith, one of the top recruiting staffers on Miami's staff. But right now, I'm not really certain if the Hurricanes will be able to pull this off in the short term. Now, he's going to commit on July 5th. I think that this recruitment is going to go until signing day no matter what. But the team that I'm actually hearing the most mentioned for Calvin Russell right now is LSU. I think the Tigers are a very, very big threat for Calvin Russell. It would not surprise me at all if he ends up a Tiger July 5th, but I've had multiple people tell me that they know this recruitment will not be over until the pen hits paper on signing day. And Miami is going to keep pushing and treating him like the number 1 receiver in America, regardless of where he announces on July 5th.
Speaking of announcing, another local star, defensive lineman James Johnson, one of the top defensive linemen in America, the top in the state of Florida, is set to decide on June 28th. Less than 2 weeks away, the top D lineman in the state is going to commit to, we're not sure yet, but do you think Miami has a good chance to hold him in state?
I think Miami has an extremely good chance to hold him in state. Miami wasn't one of the teams that I really heard mentioned a ton for him over the last couple of weeks leading up to his official visit until he actually went on that OV. And ever since then, I've heard Miami be spoken of in a very, very positive light. I think there's a lot of optimism on both sides about Miami. I spoke with someone after his official visit to Miami last weekend that said that, they were kind of getting a little bit of a Miami vibe and that they really felt like the Hurricanes were in a good position for Johnson coming off of that visit. I definitely expect Miami to be one of the finalists, but Georgia was a team that was absolutely mentioned a lot. He's already visited the Bulldogs, and I do think that Kirby Smart and what they've built in Athens absolutely has a ton of appeal to a kid like James Johnson. Right now, I'm kind of 50-50 between Miami and someone else. It's a coin flip between Miami and other, I think, for James Johnson. Could he end up a Hurricane? Absolutely. In fact, I think that there's a very, very real chance that he ends up in Coral Gables. But, am I ready to put an RPM on it or anything like that? Definitely not. And since there still are 2 weeks left, there's still time for this recruitment to have a couple more twists or turns here. There's enough time left for one school to make a significant last-second push if they really wanted to, but we'll see who he ends up picking on June 28th.
All right. Well, Stephen Wagner of Kane Sport, you're going to be busy all afternoon. So, guys, if you want more Miami updates, go check out Kane Sport. Appreciate you stopping by this live edition of the Inside Scoop.
Thanks, Josh.
All right. We just talked Miami. You know what we got to talk next. It's Notre Dame. Let's bring in Mike Singer. Mike, we talked all week. Well, we've been talking all summer about Joey O'Brien and Notre Dame. So let's get right into it. He is committing in 5 days. June 20th will be the date that Joey O'Brien is set to announce his decision. But this weekend, he's in South Bend. What are you hearing? What are the early returns on his trip?
Talking to sources at Notre Dame, they think they're getting everybody. I mean, it's kind of one of those things, Josh, where like, as soon as the official visit ends, there's such high optimism, and then things can start to change.
Right,
and visit high when that visit high wears off. But with Joey O'Brien, I think that Notre Dame is in a better position than ever with him. I think he's going to pick Notre Dame on June 20th. Could things change? Yeah, of course. But I'm rolling with my Fighting Irish prediction that I gave back in March of 2024, when I think his only other offers were from like Duke and Toledo. So Notre Dame's long been after him. But you got four names up on the screen. Kari Adams, Notre Dame's still right in the thick of that recruitment. Notre Dame, Oregon, Michigan. Caden Finley, I think Notre Dame's getting closer and closer to landing a commitment for him. I still like the Irish there. Picked him to Notre Dame earlier in the year. Evan Jacobson, the tight end from Iowa. Love where Notre Dame's at there. I've got predictions in for Notre Dame to land Jacobson, and then Preston Frizel, who I know, Steve Wiltfong spoke to you about this week. He was also on campus. I think the Irish land both Frizel and Jacobson. So it was a big weekend in South Bend. 21 official visitors, 9 targets. So, of course, 12 commits. And that would include Thomas Davis Jr., the linebacker who is a Georgia legacy and officially visited Georgia at the end of May. Just got off the phone with him before I hopped on with you, Josh. Official visit went really well. Quote, I'm committed here. That was his answer when I asked him, like, what do you kind of do moving forward with Georgia? Seems locked in with the Irish. He was very excited to talk about his OV.
Wow. So can we pull that graphic up one more time? Can you rank in confidence? Who are you most confident in Notre Dame landing and least confident on this graphic?
I hate this, but I'll do it for you, Josh, because it's like, oh, so you don't think this guy's going to Notre Dame? It's not necessarily the case, but I'll do it for you. I would say Evan Jacobson's 1.
Okay.
I actually say Joey O'Brien 2. Finley 3, and then Kari Adams 4. There's not a ton of buzz about Adams.
I thought you were going to have Finley at 4, so that's a little surprising.
Okay, yeah, I would say Kari Adams 4 just because I haven't heard as much buzz about him specifically. Okay. I think he's kind of a harder one to read. I think Finley wants to be at Notre Dame, but there's the Texas pull, and his dad played there, of course, for Michael Finley. But like when you talk to Caden, he grew up in Green Bay. Of course, that's where his father would go on to play. So Finley grew up in the Midwest, in the cold, in a town that's similar to South Bend, like Green Bay. I'm sure it's all about Green Bay Packers football. South Bend, it's Notre Dame football. So there's some things there that I think are going in Notre Dame's favor. Again, I think he wants to be at Notre Dame, but I think that Texas pull is real, and it is definitely tight between those two programs.
All right. So is there anybody that you think, I mean, we know the big dogs have like their commitment dates locked in, set. They're doing it in front of whatever, or on the On3 Recruits channel in front of thousands of people. But is there anybody coming out of the weekend that you think could pop in Notre Dame's favor?
Yeah, I mean, Larry Fitzgerald's son, Devin Fitzgerald, I'm told had a really good visit. That's the wide receiver from Phoenix Brophy Prep. I think the Irish are, in a good spot with North Carolina safety. Nick Reddish had a very good trip. Braden Robinson, I'll be posting a story about him at blueandgold.com shortly after I get off with you, Josh. He's a smaller guy, 5'8", like 160 pounds, but an absolute speed demon from Red Oak, Texas. I think Notre Dame, you just talked to Stephen Wagner. I think it's Notre Dame or Miami for Braden Robinson. Arizona probably running third. I think the Irish have a really good chance to land him. So, and then last but not least, Grayson McHugh. It's looking like Notre Dame or Penn State. He goes to Texas this weekend with a July 1st decision. That's the offensive tackle who is Joey O'Brien's teammate at LaSalle College in Pennsylvania. That one's still going to be very tight between the two schools. I'd probably say it's 51-49 in Penn State's favor right now for Grayson McHugh.
All right. Notre Dame fans, blueandgold.com. They'll have updates rolling all day. Thanks, Mike Singer. Appreciate
Thanks, Josh. Yep.
All right. Let's head out to the Plains. Talk to my guy, Jeffrey Lee of AuburnLive.com. And Auburn's having a 5-star visit weekend. We got wide receiver Cedarian Morgan, Braylon Womack, Xavier Crowell. And then they brought in a bunch of committed targets. Devin Carter there is committed, but we're going to talk about him too, because that one's getting dicey. But let's start with the big dog, wide receiver Cedarian Morgan. Jeffrey Lee, what are you hearing on Auburn?
Well, I've heard a lot. I talked to Cedarian less than an hour ago, and he said everything that you would want him to say if you're an Auburn fan. He's got the relationships there with Marcus Davis, with Hugh Freeze. They've been on him since he was a freshman. He's got the ends on the roster with Malcolm Simmons and Perry Thompson and Cam Coleman. I think he's big with Deuce Knight. He mentioned Deuce Knight, spending a lot of time with Deuce Knight this weekend. He's going to Alabama next weekend, Josh, which probably doesn't bode well for Auburn. I think Alabama's been viewed as the kind of the team to beat, maybe the presumed leader for him for a while now. And Bama getting him for that last visit before he announces probably doesn't bode well for Auburn, but I don't think it's going to be over. We talked about last weekend, Josh, that Auburn's probably going to have a better flip season than they do commit season. So I think I think he's one of those. I don't expect him to choose Auburn, although I think Auburn's right there in it. I think Auburn has a better chance to flip him than they do get a commitment from him in the summer.
All right. How about Braylon Womack and Xavier Crowell? Womack from Mississippi, Xavier Crowell, another in-state target. We've kind of talked Auburn visit weekends, and like you said, flip season is going to be more exciting than commitment season, which we're kind of in the middle of right now. But when it comes to Auburn recruiting, both these guys are in the South, deep South. Who do they have a better shot at, Crowell or Womack?
I would put Crowell in the same category as Cedarian Morgan. He's another guy I expect. I think he's going to commit June the 26th. So what's that, Tuesday week, as we would say in the deep South? And that's right after an official visit to Alabama. He and Cedarian Morgan both are going on OVs next week.
Very telling.
So, right, exactly. So I fully expect Crowell to commit to Alabama and Auburn to continue to push for a flip. Now, I think it's a different story with Braylon Womack. Auburn has been and continues to be very, very big in his recruitment. His sister plays softball here at Auburn. He's been here many, many times. You can look at his profile on On3, and the amount of visits that are actually checked it's a fraction of what he's actually been here with his parents to every softball game that they could get to. And he said this weekend, I talked to him less than an hour ago. This weekend was his best official visit so far. It was more relaxed. He's very comfortable here. He's very familiar with all the coaches. He just got to enjoy himself this weekend and feel like home. Now, he's got a trip to Ohio State scheduled next weekend, and he's going to announce on August the 22nd. But I really like Auburn right now. Ask me again next weekend after his Ohio State visit. Maybe I feel differently. But after this weekend, Josh, I really like where Auburn, a lot better standing with Braylon Womack than I think with Xavier Crowell. All
right, now let's talk about committed wide receiver Devin Carter. We're going to get into him in a minute, but Auburn fans, make sure you guys hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits channel. Now, Devin Carter has been committed pretty solid, but last weekend, seeing him and his family show up at Florida State, where his dad was a star at in the late 80s, I mean, how should Auburn fans look at this Devin Carter recruitment, or did things solidify over the weekend?
Solidified. I was very impressed with Devin Carter and the way he handled the interview. I mean, I just talked to him maybe 10 minutes ago. He's actually leaving now. But, he used the term, I'm locked in.
Nice.
This is where I want to be. This is where I want to go. And I asked him, I said, well, do you feel better about your Auburn commitment now, more so now than you did after Florida State? He said, no, not really. I felt Auburn is the right decision for me. I felt it even after Florida State. He said, I've got connections to Florida State and always will, but I felt like Auburn was home for me back in January. I feel like Auburn is home for me right now. I'm locked in. He got to spend a lot of time with Deuce Knight this weekend. All these wide receivers did. Really loves Deuce Knight, really loves the future at Auburn under Deuce Knight, and I feel like that was a big deal. So I feel really, really good about Auburn's, holding on to Devin Carter, especially after the interview. Excuse me, the interview that we had with him prior to leaving.
All right. Before I let you go, let's talk a little quarterback recruiting. Is Landon Duckworth, he's going to make his decision probably in the next month or so. Is he emerging as Auburn's top target here?
Yes, absolutely. No doubt about it. And I think this was decided in the last few weeks. I didn't know if Auburn was going to get in the game with him NIL-wise, because they had just bought. Pretty
nice shiny toy there in Deuce Knight.
And Deuce Knight. And don't forget about Jackson Arnold and Ashton Daniels. They got 2 quarterbacks out of the portal where we all know nothing is cheap in the portal, especially quarterbacks. So they took 2 quarterbacks in the offseason out of the portal. One, Jackson Arnold, where, it's been reported, I think, by Pete Nakos that, we're talking 7 figures for that guy. And then Deuce Knight certainly wasn't, a 5-star quarterback out of high school, certainly not going to be cheap either. So the question was, is Auburn willing to spend more money on a 2026 guy, or would they take a year off, maybe take a developmental guy, maybe go for a big guy in 2027? But I think the decision was made in the last few weeks that, yes, Auburn wants to push for a top 2026 guy, keep that room loaded, keep that room stacked, keep continuing to stack depth in there. And, brought him in for an official visit last weekend. And then on Friday, actually came in on Thursday night, brought him back for an unofficial visit. I think it was a 2-night visit. And really are putting their foot forward in his recruitment. And it's just Auburn and South Carolina at this point, a school that he was committed to before. And I think he's going to try to get back out to South Carolina before announcing his decision, but it's going to be tough with logistically. He's got the California Elite 11 next weekend. So it's going to be it might bode well for Auburn. They're getting this last visit, and it was very productive. He had a lot of good things to say about Auburn, and I think Auburn's actually going to be more invested in him in more ways than one moving forward.
Love to hear it. All right, Jeffrey Lee, Auburn Live. You guys are doing a great job of tracking the weekend's visits. Already got updates on most of these guys. Go check it out. Appreciate you dropping by this live edition of the Inside Scoop.
Absolutely, Josh. Thanks for having me.
We will see you later. All right. So I wanted to talk a little Tennessee with Matt. I actually wanted to get in this show some Florida Gator football recruiting, Tennessee, a couple others, USC, but we weren't able to line them all up. But Tennessee had a monster weekend, and Tristan Keys was on campus, the #1 wide receiver in America. Here he is doing what recruits do when they're on visits, which is get dressed up like you're about to go play a football game, but don't actually go play a football game. I think they do it. I mean, he's got the gloves on. I wouldn't be surprised if his cleats are taped up. Look at him. He's got the sleeves. He is ready to go. Like, what do? You just get all dressed up in full gear, and then you do this, and then you don't play a game? I don't know. Maybe they did play a little scrimmage in Neyland after this, but Tristan Keys, he's looking good in that orange. I don't know if LSU fans would agree, but Tennessee fans probably feeling great. TJ White, linebacker, seems like he had a great visit. Quarterback Zion Gibson, he's committed to Alabama. So is Tristan. Well, Tristan Keys is committed to LSU, 2 monster flip targets on campus. We're going to talk some Tennessee recruiting this week on the channel. You guys let me know, how do you think Tennessee did with Tristan Keys? Honestly, let's be honest. Do we think Tristan Keys is going to flip? Last cycle, LSU lost the #1 wide receiver in America, DeCorian Moore. He flipped his commitment to Oregon on July 4th. What do you guys think about Tristan Keys? Did LSU learn their lesson? Do they know how to keep a number one wide receiver committed? Or do you think Tristan Keys is going to flip? Let me know in the chat. And where do we think Tristan Keys, if he is going to flip, where is he going to flip to? Because if you told me right now, hey, Josh, Tristan Keys is flipping, I would have a hard, well, watching these photos, man, watching this video, I would say Tennessee, but I also have a hard time not picking Miami if he were to flip, just because of the amount of visits that he's taken to Miami. And I bet he's not done. I know he took his official visit 2 weekends ago to Miami, but I think we'll see him back in Coral Gables during the season, if not sooner. So you guys let me know in the chat, where do you think Tristan Keys is going to go? Or is he, am I wrong? Is he going to just stay committed to LSU? Let me know in the chat. All right, let's take a look at these top 10 rankings before we get out of here. These are the recruiting rankings. Do you think USC can hold on to this number one spot? They had a monster visit weekend, but it's out on the West Coast. So we'll catch up with Scott Schrader later this week. Guys are still leaving campus as we speak. LSU hanging in there at number 2. We got a big Bo Bentley decision coming up. Lamar Brown, another 5-star on the right, waiting in the wings for LSU. Ohio State, Georgia, Notre Dame at 5. You know, Notre Dame's class tends to fall apart around this time, but it seems like they are only getting stronger. The Aggies at 6, Clemson at 7, Oregon, Miami, and Alabama round out your top 10. Alabama, I said it on Twitter this week. If the trends keep trending this way, Alabama has a real shot at the number one class. I know they're sitting at number 10 right now, and we're more than halfway through the cycle, but believe me, Alabama has a shot at the number one class if these trends keep trending in that direction. But you guys let me know what you think. Also, hit subscribe if we're still here hanging out. Hit subscribe to the On3 Recruit channel. I want to get this thing to 100K by the time the season starts. I think we can do it. All right, boys. We will see you all week long. We got tomorrow, the Wilt Fong Whip Around. Steve is at home right now in the recruiting bunker, just talking to recruits, talking to coaches, getting the inside intel. Then the Inside Scoop is back on Wednesday. We'll have the Simmons Scoop on Wednesday as well. See you guys soon. Appreciate you.